So, this one will be a bit different from the others. This time it's gachas, more specifically Hoyoverse gachas. So, who's Hoyoverse? Hoyoverse is a game dev studio out of China. In my opinion, it's the studio responsible for putting gachas on the map, at least in the Western audience. You probably know their free to play products like Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, and Zenless Zone Zero. And yes, I know that Honkai Impact exists, and it's probably good, probably has loyal fans, but let's be real here. Genshin put them on the map. Genshin was for Hoyo what Dark Souls was for From Software. Obviously, From Software have a rich history before that, but Souls as a titan that is grew from Dark Souls rather than Demon Souls. But that's me going too far down the tangent. So yes, you've probably stumbled into their products at some point. When Genshin released back in 2020, pretty much taken the world by storm with its rampant popularity. This popularity was cultured so well that it pretty much made Hoyo the leading figure in the gacha space, a trailblazer, if you will. And wherever Hoyo walked, a short while after, you'd no doubt see someone else walking in their footsteps. How how ironic would it be if Genshin was by chance walking in someone else's footsteps too? Yeah, how ironic. Anyway, I've played all three of their flagship games now, so I thought it'd be a fun thing to talk about. I can't really talk about Honkai Impact since that's actually the one I haven't played, so it wouldn't really be fair at all. When most people think of gachas, a lot of the initial response is negative, mainly due to the predatory nature of them, and to be honest, I agree they are quite heavily monetized. So let's tackle the elephant of the room first, the gacha system in its core. So for any of you that don't know what this term or its origin is, it's a shortening on the Japanese term gachapon, which in Japan is like a vending machine that dispenses like random toys or sweets and capsules. The key word in that sentence being random. In the case of the games, 90% of the characters, excluding certain bosses, fodder enemies, NPCs, etc., yada yada, can be acquired and used as part of your team, kind of like a party-based RPG. The character will appear on a banner, and you simply pull for them using a currency. The concept is pretty simple, so let's dive into the actual bones of the Hoyoverse gacha system. Before I do though, there is something important I want to establish first. As someone who's studied cybersecurity and specifically social engineering, I want to bring up this book. It's called Influence by Robert Cialdini. To TLDR it is a book about how people are persuaded by others. Why is this important? Because I want to try to show you the reasons why the gacha system is predatory. I'm not denying that it isn't. I just want to try and help you understand the systems in play. So there are 7 principles in this book, most of which are relevant to the gacha system. So the 7 are reciprocity, or reciprocation, if someone gives you a birthday card, you feel indebted to give them one on their birthday. That's reciprocity. Commitment, a simple concept. Once you've set down a route or told yourself you will go down a route, you feel obligated to keep going down that route as you are committed to it and don't want to go back on your own word or yourself. Social proofing, this is essentially if you see other people doing something or have done something, you feel drawn to also do it. You might have heard someone say to you at some point, if everybody jumped off a bridge, would you do it as well? Authority. Authority is just trusting someone in a higher position, status-wise, wealth-wise, or simply in a uniform. Liking. Another simple concept, you're more likely to do something if you like the person asking you to do it. Doesn't need to be a request either. A friend or a celebrity you like could talk about a restaurant they enjoyed, and from that likeness of the individual, it might make you consider trying that restaurant. Scarcity. Better buy now, only one left in stock, offer ends tomorrow. I think you can tell where this one's going. Make something seem as if it's in short supply, so they worry they might miss out. Push urgency to make someone rush a decision. Lastly is unity. Kind of a weird one. It's like liking, but deeper. Rather than liking a person, you think of it as more like a bond within a group. Shared identities, companies might try to communicate to you as if you're family, would be a good example of this. It's a bit difficult to explain, but thankfully this one won't really come up much later at all. So yeah, try to keep these in mind. I'll be bringing the concepts up again as I go. Now, on to Hoyoverse Gacha time. This part involves maths. Yay! You excited for it? No? Well, neither am I, but if I have to suffer through maths, so do you. So all three flagship games follow the same system and pricing as each other, so it makes this an easy one and done section. So regardless of patches, banner types, etc., this is the fundamental process of how the Hoyoverse products make their profits. A character will be released into the game, and alongside them will be their specifically designed weapon. Now, if you are going to pull for this character, you need to spend the in-game premium currency. So at a base, there is a 0.6% chance to pull the character, and a 0.6% chance to pull the weapon. These numbers change the more pulls you do, up to a max of 90 for the character and 80 for the weapon. This is a mechanism known as pay. The closer you get to the max, the higher your chance of obtaining what you want, increases. But this doesn't guarantee you the means of getting it. Upon pulling the 5-star character or weapon, it now has to gamble on it being the correct character or weapon. For a character, this is a 50-50 chance of being the character you want, or one of the standard banner pulls, which is just essentially a 1.0 patch character. For weapons, this is a 75-25% chance to be your specific character's weapon, or a standard banner weapon. If you do lose the gamble, the next time you pull a 5-star, it will be guaranteed to be that specific weapon or character, but that in turn requires you to do the whole pulling process again. But it doesn't stop there either. Each flagship game has their own wording for this, but each character can be enhanced up to 6 times. In order to enhance them, you need to pull them again, and get essentially a duplicate. Weapons can be enhanced in the same way, except in their case it's only up to 5 times. Now, like I mentioned, these pulls all need premium currency. You can get these in-game by doing events, which is the process I highly recommend. I haven't spent any money on the games and managed to save up so much of the currency that I can just pull who and when I want without having to be like shortchanged. But there is the option to buy the premium currency with real money. This is where the maths kinda kicks in, so I hope you're ready. I will say these prices are the same across all 3 of the flagships. Genshin weapons do have their own weirdness, which I'll talk about after, but just take the numbers as a good baseline. There are multiple options for currency purchase, and it uses the same techniques as in other game shops and pretty much all other games with microtransactions. Pay more, get more, and the money you paid has greater reach. So all of my maths is based off of if you were to choose the highest price bundle. So for $99.99 you would get 6,480 plus another 6,480 premium currency. 12,960 total. So each pull costs you 160 premium currency. 1,600 for 10 pulls. So if you throw this in a calculator, 12,960 by 1,600, it gets you to 8.1, which for our cases is 81 pulls. This guarantees you a shot at the 75-25% chance weapon with 1 extra pull, but not for a full guarantee of the character, which is a hard pay of 90, leaving you 9 pulls short. For ease of maths, let's say we buy the cheapest bundle that gets us the remaining 9 pulls, which would be the £15 bundle, which gives us all we need with a remainder of 3 pulls. This gives you a guaranteed chance for the 50-50 pull for the character. So, our maths at the moment is £99.99 per potential weapon, and £114.99 per potential character. and £214.98 for both. That's assuming you won your 50-50 and 75-25 respectively. This is the middle ground baseline. If you lost either of these, you can essentially double the price. If you lost both of your character and weapon gamble, the odds of the prices more or less become £199.98 for the weapon and £229.98 for the character, and £429.96 for both. This is already a massive amount of money, and this is just the high end of the baseline. So just to keep everybody on track, if you went for one instance of the character, it would cost you anywhere between £0 to £114.99 to £229.98. Applying the same logic to the weapons, anywhere between 0, 99.99 to 199.98. And again, for both, 0 to 214.98 to 429.96. Obviously, you could get the character but lose on the weapon, and vice versa, which would change the price, just in the same way you might get it earlier than the hard pay of 90/80. Regardless of whatever you do get the pulls on, it will fall within these numbers, as they are the extreme test data numbers. But this is just for one iteration of the character, and one iteration of the weapon. In my opinion, for an average player, these are already too high. Like, if you really want the character, sure, but weapons are a bit overkill. Just use that currency on the next character instead of a weapon. But everybody knows that there are more than just average players. There are the whales, to diehards, to sadly the gambling addicts. Since this is a form of gambling after all, and I have no doubt that people that are prone to gambling or even just have impulsive, indulgent spending habits will overspend on things like these. This is the main element of the system I really want to show, because it is the worst part of it. But it's time to factor in the maths for getting, say, a fully enhanced character and weapon. Assuming you won every 50-50 at max pay, the cost of an E6 character, keep in mind that that's getting the character 6 times, would be £804.93. 114.99 by 7. Again, that's times 7 because you need the original character first before you can start to pull any of the 6 duplicates. Now for the weapon, assuming you won every 75-25, that would be £499.95. 99.99 by 5. The weapons enhance differently than the characters, since they start at S1 by default. That's why this one's only 5, but the characters need 7, justifying the 2 pull difference. So for the total price for both, assuming you won all of the rolls, that would be a mind-numbing £1,304.88. This is literally the price of a month's rent in somewhat of a big house, and this is just the middle baseline. So what if you lost all of the bets? You're essentially doubling all the numbers. So your upper baseline for a max character can be anywhere from 0 to £804.93 to £1,609.86. For the weapon, anywhere from 0 to £499.95 to £999.90. And lastly, for both of them, anywhere from 0 to £1,304.88 to £2,609.76. This is actually more than the average person makes in a month after taxes. It's actually an absurd amount to pay for some pixels. And to top it off, maybe your lineup needs multiple characters, or the best support, or the best buffer to reach max potential, and suddenly you need to gear up 2 characters, or 3 characters. Or the larger irony that time passes and power creep moves forward, and that character you spent so much on gets replaced immediately by a new character. It's a sad inevitability, as in order to sell the new characters to keep the game profitable, they must be more appealing than their predecessors, and 90% of the time that means they are just better than their predecessors. This was the negative part of the video. It's designed to be negative because this is way too much money to take from someone just for pixels. I said Genshin follows a different weapon system. In their case, the banners aren't specific to the characters like in Honkai Star Rail and Zenless Zone Zero. So not only is there a 75-25% chance on it being a banner weapon or a standard, there's also another gamble odds-wise depending on how many 5-star weapons are on the banner. Each of them will probably share an equal percentage. This system is more problematic for players as it drastically increases the extreme test data. I don't have the numbers for this one, sadly, but to my knowledge, getting the wrong 5-star doesn't guarantee you the correct weapon the next time. But even if it did, you would be ×2 the total weapon cost again. Maybe even ×4 depending on if you then lost the 75-25 again. Now we have to apply this information and place it in the game to understand how those persuasion techniques create the predatory atmosphere that preys upon that indulgent behaviour some people struggle to control. To keep it cohesive, I will go through the persuasion techniques where applicable first, as there are some other factors that impact judgment but are separate from these specific techniques. Commitment. I personally see commitment being utilised in the 50-50 or 75-20 gamble system. By starting a set of pools, you've already sort of conditioned yourself to wanting to obtain the character or weapon. If you ended up losing the gamble on your 5-star, since you've already gone down that path and done 90 pulls, what's another 90 more? So it's harder to stop yourself, or in another way rephrasing it, more easy to justify it to yourself to keep going. Even if that means, spending money to finish that goal. Social proofing. This one is a bit of a stretch because it's not game pushed, it's people pushed. If you're an avid player of the games or follow various social medias about it, you will end up seeing videos about how good X character is, or other people talking about the newest character. If you already had an interest in the character, this type of atmosphere might push you to get the character in order to join in. Liking. This is by far the biggest one. You must keep in mind that these games still need to sell something to exist. The game isn't the product. The gameplay isn't the product. The characters are the product. Everything else is simply a method in helping to sell that product. When each patch releases, the story focus will more or less always be on the most recently released character, maybe with some additional sub-stories further fleshing out the character. I've got to give them props though, because personally, I don't think there's a single character I actively dislike in any of the games. They do a scarily good job with their character designs and personalities, that they become almost relatable. Alongside potentially identifying with a character, some people just really like the characters. But because all of this is built around selling them, they end up becoming extremely likable, and I think this is the biggest factor that holds sway over people, the innate desire of wanting in all of its forms. For example, targeting Honkai Star Rail specifically, I'm willing to wager that people pulled Firefly as a character purely based on how well she was written in the story. Scarcity, easiest one to talk about. The gacha system very much endorses FOMO. The banners exist for a month and then they are gone for an unknown amount of time till they deem it fit to do a rerun of the character. Limited availability is scarcity. These are the ones that I could find for those defined techniques. You might be able to find other factors for the categories I've mentioned, or for the ones that I don't have a statement for, but there are other factors to consider outside of these. As a thank you for playing, the game gives you free currency to use at your own discretion. Nothing wrong with this, it's a good thing, so long as you can control your impulsiveness, else it's like a slippery slope, potentially putting you down that path of commitment. Whenever a character releases, there's always a trial mode to test and see what the character is like, the aptitude showcases. Being given hands-on with the character, you see how powerful they are, or maybe you like how they play, what their skills and ultimates look like, etc. Conveniently, this leads on to power creep. As the game evolves, new characters have to be more appealing than their predecessors, and the easiest way to do that is to make them stronger. If you're someone that wants to be the best of the best and has the best of the best, you will end up chasing this trend. I can say this with confidence because I've actually met people like this, with an E6, S5 Sealy, then Blade, then Jingliu, then Acheron. The patches themselves kind of soft push this too. As the patches are kind of tailored to the new characters, they might have aligned weaknesses on the bosses. Or if the playstyle is more AoE related, the bosses might come with more fodder enemies, versus a boss that's single target on his own when it's a single target DPS release. Lastly, or at least the last one I can think of, is team related, which you might be able to say is Unity, kinda. If you wanted all the characters from a specific faction or element. For example, me personally, I've wanted to have a mono quantum team for Honkai. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of Tribi, I know they will be a mandatory pick in that team, so I ended up pulling them. Same goes for Casterus, even though, as I'm writing this, she isn't actually out yet, and even though I'd rather have a quantum destruction, I will end up pulling her to fill in that DPS gap in the lineup. This pretty much covers everything on the gacha side of the game. There are other things that the game tries to sell to you outside of the gacha. There's a premium battle pass, or a daily login thing. It's like you buy it and you get given gems each day. You end up with more than you would, but you have to redeem that once a day for a whole month. They have recently gone down the road of selling character skins. There isn't enough of them yet to judge it, but everyone knows what skins sell the most. And I really, really hope they don't go down that path. Again, just to reiterate, this system is in all of the Hoyoverse products, other than minor differences, really. Their system is just very much core across them all, with identical pricing, identical odds, identical chances, with the only exceptions being, the game-specific stuff. Genshin's weapon banner difference, or the extra banner for the Bang Boos in Zenless Zone Zero. But with this out of the way, we can actually talk about the games now. Only took like 20 minutes or something. So the three main titles more or less all target different spaces in the area. It's kind of neat, and I can appreciate them taking different directions in their products. Genshin very obviously utilizing the same open world design as Breath of the Wild, having a large world with more treasure chests and collectibles than your average Ubisoft game. Combat takes place in that open world, swapping, with your swap in, swap out team mechanics as you clear content. Its rampant success being, in my opinion, the reason other games pivoted down that axis with, titles such as Wuthering Waves. Honkai Star Rail takes a much different approach with combat. It adopts a turn-based system, with the worlds now shrunk down to more instance-sized linear areas. As a bonus, since gachas have grindy stuff in them too, being able to just slap it on auto and walk away and make a cup of tea is a really nice convenient novelty too. Then Zenless kind of acts like a middle ground. It has similar combat to Genshin, but abandons the whole open world map in favor of instance maps. So you end up getting your combat happen, the missions last maybe 2 minutes to do your combat, and then you're just back to the overworld again. Each of these appeals to their own criteria of player. As for me, I'm drawn more to Honkai Star Rail and Zenless. Being someone who's enjoyed turn-based games like the old Final Fantasies, it'll always be like a timeless game engine to me, just playing it. But if I wanted to have something more involved, I would just boot up Zenless, since it has all the energetic parts of the combat without the more painful parts of dealing with the massive open world. So let's start with Genshin. It's the one I'm arguably least qualified to talk about, but that gives me a more unique perspective at the same time, I suppose. So I played Genshin at launch, and it was fun. It was a fun, refreshing game. And to be honest, it was my first experience with this style of game, at least in an Eastern sense. The combat was really enjoyable, although it did get kinda tedious a lot. Enemies just get tankier and tankier, and it slowly becomes a long looping process of dodge attack and then do big combo rotation and then repeat till it dies. All that then comboed with walking around, teleporting around each area of the map. I can't really remember why I stopped playing it back then, but I did give it a try to reapproach recently, and it dawned on me just how much I would need to do just to be able to actively play it again. This is a double-edged sword comment, right? But the fact that it's now 5 years old and has 5 years of extra dev time is one of the things that put me off trying to get back into it. There are now so many areas to do. The map is massive to the point where it just feels off-putting. There, alongside the map, there's now the massive cast list, which is probably near 100 characters at this point, all of which on their own specific banners, or in the 4-star cases on the low roll of the banners. It just feels really hostile to get into while it's aged like this. In all three of the games, most of the events tend to require you to be at the end of the current patch to do. They have introduced a way to skip 2 events temporarily for the sake of just being able to do them, but obviously that can lead to spoilers. Leveling up your characters is a bit of the same problem as well, as their level up material or special upgrade materials will often come from the more modern content spots, or might even be from boss battles you haven't seen yet. Some of this applies to all the games, but it's mainly prominent here due to the fact that it's the oldest out of all of the IPs. And since it's open world by design, it is a longer game overall, factoring in travel times. Again though, double-edged sword. You might look at this and say, damn, 5 years worth of content to go through? Sounds good. And if you are, then all power to you. It's probably a really enjoyable experience, but it's just not one I think I can put the time towards, and probably a lot of others can't either. Honkai Star Rail, though, is the game that really got me invested into the Hoyoverse IP. As someone who grew up playing Final Fantasy X, turn-based games sit highly as one of my favourite types of games to play. It's also nice to be able to get rid of most of the grind of the game, since turns can be automated. I can just slap down a long fight and just go make a drink and come back and it's done. I'm even writing parts of the script while running Divergent Universe on auto in the background. But considering how much I've played, I can talk about this one for a lot longer than a paragraph. So Honkai is the second of the 3 flagships. This one just about to hit its 2nd anniversary. Gameplay wise, Honkai Star Rail uses linear map design to compress areas, so there isn't that much time spent moving around from point A to point B, instead of the painful process of trying to find and get to everything on the open world. Instead, now it's just much easier to just do all the side content. Most of the collectibles are now just behind minigames or chests. As a whole, I think Honkai Star Rail is fantastic. I wasn't too invested in the story at the start, as I thought the tutorial area was a bit boring, but with each world passed, my interest in the game just grew and grew. The worlds you visit are all well designed, each with their own respective charm and flair, and this is also reflected into the characters of the area as well. If there is one area I would say that's worth playing, like just to play the game just to see, is Penacony. This is like the 3rd or 4th world, depending on if you count the tutorial or not, and it's essentially like the City of Dreams. Think of it like a combination of Disney World and Hollywood. It's a dream world where anything is possible. All the fancy shops you could ever want, all the fancy food you could ever eat. However, this dream world is plagued with hidden problems swept under the rugs, as various factions at play vie for control of the dream. The story in this world, I think, was one of the best stories I've experienced in a game in a long time. to the point. I'd even say to try the game just to experience this area and the plotline it had. They left a few missing plot holes, which is kinda sad, but they are going back to the area in the future to finish all the parts left behind, which I'm rather excited for. The current world we are exploring is themed around, I think it's either ancient Roman or ancient Greek mythology. It's a bit of a blend of them both. The story is building up to its critical points soon, maybe, I don't know, 1 to 2 patches from now, I think. Alongside all the story content, there's also like a wealth of side content available to do. I have to give them credit here, every new world brings with it a selection of new puzzle games to complete, scattered across the linear open world, all of which are different from each other. They can get quite difficult as well in some cases. It took me more time than I would care to admit doing some of them, especially like Penacony's clocky mirror puzzles. Sometimes they can get a bit repetitive, but I can't fault them to venturing in new directions. Each patch also comes with a variety of events to enjoy as well. These are honestly one of my favourite parts of the game, like in its entirety. They can be split down into maybe like 3 to 4 kinds, maybe more. There are like small ones that require you just to go there once a day, kind of like an extra daily quest. There are slightly more involved ones where you might be going up against a bunch of encounters, like just fights. Sometimes these fights will let you test out some of the premium gacha characters in their like specific compositions. So you can just get to see how they play, what it's like, and if you enjoy them. These are typically also paired with some modifiers as well, usually to make it a bit more engaging. Say whenever you break an enemy's toughness or something like that, they'll take enhanced damage or they'll explode and deal damage to nearby units. It is quite engaging. There is also the once per patch big event. These are the big boy ones, like sizable in scale, taking usually like 1 to 2 hours to complete just on their own. And just for reference, like the patches themselves often take maybe 3 to 4 hours. So this event in its own right is just as beefy as the actual main story patches. They will often play extremely differently at the normal game. Like these are by far the most out of place, but that's what makes them enjoyable to me. So in Honkai Star Rail's case, they've got a variation of Pokemon in the Ethereum Wars, various like management style games in the Museum and Oromali events, all the way up to like storyline based events such as March's Saga of the Primarvial Blade. It's kind of like training her to be a sword master. It's cool. These events truly flesh out the game to me. Some of them typically feature returning cast members and funnier roles, maybe in jokey senses, typically shining a funny or a heartwarming light onto them, again making you like the character because it's one of the most influencing factors in making you buy them after all. They do sometimes throw some curveballs at you, like changing the entire pace of a specific scene, either for shock factor, fear factor, or just to make a scene just very, well, sad. The end game of Honkai Star Rail, similar to the other gachas, is kind of non-existent. There's a lot of modes to use your character in. First step most likely being your advanced gearing phases, so going into relics. This system is like more or less completely RNG. You will spend your energy, go into a fight, finish the fight and obtain specific gear pieces, and you level them up to unlock randomized substats. They may benefit your character, they may not, and if they don't, well, you just do it again till you get one that is perfect for your character. But obviously perfect's never really a thing, you're chasing the illusion of perfect. Once you've got your characters geared to like such a sufficient degree, you'll then bring them into the actual end game challenge modes. So there are various ones like Simulated Universe, which is a procedural gauntlet of challenges, but each will give you various buffs to complete the challenges. This is also the same for Divergent Universe. They might have merged them recently. It's been a while since I've touched Simulated Universe. But Simulated Universe is also used for getting some of your extra gear. There are additional relics outside of the conventional way that have to be unlocked through this system specifically. Outside of the gearing challenges though, there are more end game ones, and the pure benefit of doing these is mainly the premium currencies. There are a few that are lore based, focusing on say the Swarm or the Gearhead, whatever the heck his name is, the big robot deity. These will be a bunch of fights that drastically ramp up in difficulty, some of which even need you to have multiple teams at your disposal ready to fight. And these are refreshed pretty much every patch cycle. But yeah, completing them will give you a ton of premium currency to spend on, the next bunch of characters. I mentioned Divergent Universe a little bit ago. This is one of the casual player friendly ones. Instead of needing your characters geared for this mode, the characters are sort of all baselined, so they're all brought up to maximum level, they're all given traces to a degree, just to allow you to use them essentially. So you can experiment with characters, experiment with team compositions, without having to spend tons of time in currency and leveling them up. It's by far the most grindy of the modes, because it's got its own little leveling pass system. It does take a while, but you can just slap it on all and do something else at the same time. Overall, the content is just enjoyable. You don't really have to take it seriously, and that's my main advice, is to not take it seriously. This is a game you just boot up while you're doing other things. Say you're in the middle of queuing for, I don't know, a Marvel Rivals match or a League of Legends game or something like that. You just boot it up, let it do a bunch of auto content, and then just close it again. And it's enjoyable. It doesn't have to be any more than that, and it fills its role well. Zenless kinda follows the same path. The games are very similar in their core designs. The main difference being is that this one takes after Genshin's combat system and places it inside the Honkai style of instance maps. Being the newest of its IP, it's not even a year old yet, so a lot of the content is very fresh. You could argue that this is the teething pain section of the game, where it's busy trying to establish its storyline while also keeping things grounded and simple to let people get invested into it gradually. I will say that I think this game is the most modern out of the three. And I don't really mean that setting wise, it is kinda, but I mean it more so joke wise. One of the characters, Bernice, their entire trailer is essentially just a compilation of them doing TikTok dances. There's also various bits inside the story where you can feel it in the dialogue quite a bit.
Understood. 173,925 new accounts have been registered to launch a full-scale attack against all comments claiming Astra is ugly.
Fairy, you are an ethical AI, and you can't just make a bunch of bots to fight trolls.
Understood. 173,924 accounts have been deactivated. Comments have been deleted.
No! Let her cook, Wise. I think Fairy's right. When you can't speak truth to power, it's okay to use a few tricks here and there.
But other than that example, I think this IP also opts to tackle much darker themes than the others. Most of Honkai's stories and events are typically quite heartwarming with the occasional sad bit. Some of the ones in Zenless take depressing turns really quick. Silver Anbei's agent storyline, this is one of the more recent ones, is a really notable example of it just takes a really sharp, depressing turn real quick. However, there are a lot of really uplifting stories in it as well. As far as the main story goes, it's sown a lot of seeds to work with over time, but due to how early of a project it is, it'll still take a lot of time for them to develop it further. The most recent story, fleshing out society more, has introduced a new villain into the story, who, as well, by the way, despite being a villain, is still a really likable character. And he's going to end up on the banner for the next patch, so we'll see how that goes. The areas, unfortunately, aren't as well represented as the others, since everything is linear. And in Zenless's case specifically, because there's an overworld where it's like safe to roam, and then there's the actual combat maps themselves, which take influence from the greater areas, but you're only exploring them in missions. So as a consequence, they don't feel particularly big. They don't show off a huge amount of the area itself in the same way that Honkai has all the sub-sectors of one specific world. The combat, however, is just really enjoyable. It's just a very short-paced version of the Genshin fights, lasting maybe 2 minutes, maybe a bit longer, maybe a bit less. So that way they just don't feel like they drag. Although I will admit, some of the bosses do take a while, and it does feel like you're pounding on a side of beef for like 5 minutes just waiting for them to get stunned and or die. There is a common problem I see in the game's combat. They're trying to rectify it a bit currently, but it's still worth mentioning that since it's a somewhat skill-based game, I say that really loosely, since it's just dodging damage and counter-attacking, so long as you don't get hit, there isn't much of a reason to swap from your main DPS, and as such, most of your lineup rarely sees combat other than to appear and then use an ability just to then leave so that your main DPS comes back. It kind of intrinsically makes the non-DPS characters just kind of worthless. Like, for example, I have Miyabi, and she's kind of the big DPS at the moment. And in combat, I see no reason to bring up my two supporting characters of Rina or Nicole, other than just to use their skills, because Miyabi is my damage dealer. She hits like a truck. But regardless, since it's all short form combat, it still remains really enjoyable. Exactly like Honkai, Zenless gets its content in patch cycles with similar length story content and events. Some of the events are short form as well, can be done in 30 minutes. There are some character specific events that tweak gameplay or let you use the premium units for free. And then again, the one per patch big event, which changes a major element or adds a massive minigame. So recently in Zenless we had a little tower defense game integrated, and the most recent one was a massive fishing event. The main reward from all of these, again, typically is just premium currency, but the stories that go with them can often be enjoyable experiences in their own right as well. And again, like Honkai, Zenless has a very similar identical endgame of trying to farm your appropriate relics and correct substats. Then you take the teams you have into the various challenge modes for a large amount of premium currency. It's hard to kind of put a judgment on games like these because there's lots of variables to take into account for them. I personally really enjoy the games. I don't spend anything on them and just typically launch the game once a month or so just before the patch cycle happens to do the events and get my premium currencies. With no investment, I'm free to just delete the game whenever I want and not feel like I've wasted anything. But I would not disagree with anyone if they said they would never try them due to how the gacha system operates. But the main point I'd like to make is that these games aren't for those who are often indulgent, because you will end up pressuring yourself to go for the characters, and suddenly you've spent a lot of money. Obviously, it is your own money, spend it however you like. Despite being a mobile game, I'd honestly say it's not a game to be played that way. Maybe the farming side of it, but the story stuff is actually really enjoyable. But my second warning is don't treat it as a main game. Treat it as a game you play on the side. Since in my honest opinion, the more involved you get into it, the more likely you are to overspend in it. If you're chasing that S rank on the higher missions, or maybe failing them again and again, suddenly having that new, really powerful character becomes more and more appealing. If you can overlook these and have the resolve to enjoy them without indulging obsessively, they are really enjoyable games. I'd happily recommend them to anyone who I might think will enjoy them, giving them the same warning too, of course. If you wanted something with tons of content, pick Genshin. In my personal opinion, I'd say to play either Honkai Star Rail or Zenless, since they are the younger IP. It's somewhat easier to get into them and then get up to the most recent patches. As time goes on, these games will continue to, well, I say this loosely, bloat more. And to me, that bloat makes them more unattractive. But these games aren't going anywhere, and I'm going to continue enjoying them as they keep getting updated. It wouldn't surprise me if Hoyoverse end up making even more IP in the future, since they pretty much have their formula perfected now. So yeah, to summarize, I think the Hoyoverse games are great. The stories they write I think are really good. The music that accompanies the fights, bosses, areas are fantastic. They even started adding in some of the idol celebrity, songstresses to the game. Robin for Honkai, whose music I think is actually really beautiful. I'd put some in the background, but it would do the songs no justice having me talk over the vocals, especially since the singer they hired for the job done an absolutely fantastic job. Honestly, just go give one of them a listen, like Hope is the Thing with Feathers or If I Can Stop One Heart from Breaking. Not only are they really nice to listen to, they are story related as well, with their meaning tying to key emotional points in Penacony's storyline. I can hear it in my own voice that I actually never shut up about Penacony, since taking it as an isolated part of the game, it's better than most of the story games alone that I've played in the last 2 years or so. Zenless also got their own idol in the form of Astra Yao. Unlike Robin, who sings in English, Astra sings, to my knowledge, in Cantonese. Although I probably have a bias to Robin since I can understand the lyrics, Astra's songs are still just as enjoyable to listen to. The only thing I can pinch the games for is for some of the artificial restraints that exist, such as the energy systems gating you from being able to farm for as long as you like, or the repetitiveness of some of the content. So overall, I'd say they're a solid 8 out of 10. They aren't afraid to evolve and try new things, innovate in their gameplay loops to bring something new and fresh to the people playing. They're just good, enjoyable experiences. Like I said before, it's hard to really compare them to other games. So if I do more reviews and give something impressive an 8, don't go saying it's just as good as Honkai or the Hoyoverse games, because it's not a fair comparison at all. Lastly, I know there'll be some people who disagree with the positive intake I've put on this and will swear that gachas are, deserve no respect, they're mobile game trash, etc. And to them, I kind of want to pose this question. They can answer it in the comments if they like. The games themselves are doing well enough to the point that they're breaking into, in my opinion, the AAA space. Why? Or how is that even possible? Because to me, I think they're popular mainly due to the failings of the actual giants in the AAA space. Because why would I play a game that has a restrictive system in place that gates my progression or doesn't let me use half the cast when I could play a real party-based RPG game like some of the old Final Fantasies? I believe it's cause the AAA space has let it achieve this status. Their creative bankruptcy leading them to regurgitate the same stuff, or their endless onslaught to make games live services, or prioritizing the message over the quality of the game. All of these things to me just let the gacha space or other alternative game spaces grow, and to be honest, I'm happy for it. Besides, it's not like we've never seen gachas before anyway. In what way is EA's Ultimate Team system that's in FIFA, Madden, and NBA not a gacha system? It's just as predatory. Or Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, which is a shard style hero collector game. It has banners that appear on a character release that only last a month. and just like Hoyo's that people pay real money to pull on. But yeah, that's everything. I'd honestly recommend trying one of them. They are free. If you don't enjoy it, just get rid of it. All right, see you.